You've definitely heard the name George Soros, the legendary investor. But what if I told you that behind the market wizard, there's a philosopher? And that philosopher has a pretty radical way of looking at the world. In this explainer, we're going to unpack the core ideas that he claims didn't just make him a fortune, but actually offer a whole new way to see reality itself.
So that's the big question, right? How does a student of philosophy, someone who's reading deep thinkers like Karl Popper, somehow end up absolutely mastering the chaotic world of high finance? Well, the answer isn't in some dusty financial textbook. It's buried in a set of really powerful ideas about how our own minds interact with the world around us.
And there you have it, straight from the man himself. Soros is basically telling us that the secret sauce, it's not actually about money. It's about a fundamental relationship he spotted between how we think and what happens in the real world. So let's dig in and figure out what this framework is all about. Okay, so to really get Soros's big idea, we've got to rewind a bit. Think about his early life, surviving the Nazi occupation of Hungary, then studying under the philosopher Karl Popper in London. These experiences gave him a profound distrust of any system, any ideology that claimed to have all the answers. And all of that led him to two really foundational principles. The first principle is fallibility. And it sounds complex, but it's actually a pretty simple and kind of profound idea. It just means that our understanding of the world is always, always incomplete. It's just too complex. We're all working with a partial, slightly distorted picture. Nobody, and I mean nobody, has perfect knowledge.
The second principle is reflexivity. And this is where it gets really interesting. Because this idea says that our flawed understanding of the world isn't just a passive thing. Our beliefs, our misconceptions, they actually go out and shape the reality we're trying to understand. You see, it's a two-way street. Our thoughts influence events, and then those events turn around and influence our thoughts.
All right, so let's take this abstract philosophy and see how it becomes a very real, very concrete money-making machine. And there's no better place to see it in action than in the financial markets. So Soros basically saw the market as this dance of feedback loops. You've got negative feedback, which is self-correcting. It's the boring, stable one that kind of keeps prices in check. But then you have positive feedback. And this one is the wild one. It's self-reinforcing. A rising price makes people want to buy, which pushes the price even higher, which makes more people want to buy. You see, this is the engine that creates massive trends, bubbles, and busts. And this quote just completely flips conventional wisdom on its head. Most people think the stock market just reflects what's happening in the economy. Soros says no way. He argues the market actively creates what's happening. Think about it. If investors are really optimistic about a company, its stock price goes up, making it easier for them to borrow money. That cheap money lets them invest and grow, which makes their business fundamentals actually better, which in turn justifies the initial optimism. It's a perfect reflexive cycle. So once he had this concept of reflexivity nailed down, Soros was able to build a kind of model for the entire life cycle of a financial bubble. And the key thing to remember is this isn't about random madness. It's a process with a predictable, logical flow. And according to Soros, every bubble needs two key ingredients. First, you need a genuine trend that's happening in the real world, like house prices are actually going up. And second, you need a widespread misconception about that trend. For example, the belief that house prices can only go up forever. When those two things start feeding off each other, boom, you've got a bubble. And this just lays out the whole playbook perfectly. It starts small, then it accelerates as the trend and the misconception get locked in this reinforcing dance. Then it survives a little test, a small dip, which tricks everyone into thinking it's invincible. That's when you hit the twilight period, where the smart money is getting nervous, but the party's still going, until you hit that tipping point. And then the whole thing goes into reverse, and that reflexive engine that pushed everything up now sends it all crashing down.
And if you want to see a real-world example of this, look no further than the 2008 financial crisis. Soros called it a super bubble, and it was fueled by this huge misconception that markets could just regulate themselves. By 2008, the total amount of credit in the U.S. had swollen to 365% of the entire country's GDP. I mean, that gap between perception and reality had become a canyon. A tipping point wasn't just likely, it was inevitable.
But here's the thing. For Soros, this whole reflexivity idea isn't just about making money. He applies the exact same logic to our society, to the relationship between capitalism and democracy, which he calls the open society. And what he sees there is a pretty fundamental conflict. He says that modern society is basically caught between two big, flawed ideas.
On one side, you have the Enlightenment fallacy, which says that reality is this separate, objective thing that we can perfectly understand with pure reason. It totally ignores that our thoughts actually mess with reality. On the other side, you have the postmodern fallacy, which goes to the other extreme and says, reality is just a story, we can make it whatever we want it to be. And that ignores that some things are just, well, real. Soros's framework tries to find the truth in the middle.
Now, this really gets to the heart of the problem he sees. Just look at the values that make markets work. They're amoral. It's not about right or wrong, it's about what works. The motive is profit. The method is competition. Now compare that to the values you need for a healthy society. Those values have to be moral, they have to be focused on the public interest, and they rely on cooperation. He argues these two sets of values are basically like oil and water. And this right here is the big danger he calls market fundamentalism. It's this belief that we can run everything, our government, our schools, our society, like a business. But when you do that, you're stripping away the moral dimension. Politics stops being about what's good for everyone and starts being about what's profitable for someone. And for Soros, that's a direct threat to the foundation of a democratic society.
So where does all this leave us today? Well, Soros uses these exact same concepts, fallibility, reflexivity, to look ahead, to analyze the new world order that he believes rose from the ashes of the 2008 crisis.
You see, for Soros, 2008 wasn't just a financial thing. It was way bigger than that. It was the moment that broke the whole system. It was the end of an era where the United States was the unquestioned leader of a globalized world. That old system, he says, has fundamentally failed. And looking ahead, he sees the world being shaped by a big competition between two different systems. You've got the US-led model of international capitalism, which is kind of weakened and struggling right now. And then you have China's rising model of state capitalism, where the government takes a much more hands-on approach to directing the economy. So what does this new world actually look like through his eyes? Well, he predicts the US will continue to lose some of its power and influence. China comes out as the big winner, kind of the new engine for the global economy. The problem is that new engine is smaller, which means slower growth for everybody. And he warns that if we just let things drift, the whole global system could slowly break apart. That's why he argues for a new global agreement to try and build a more stable world. Which brings us right to the final, really big question. Soros's entire philosophy is built on human uncertainty. So if we accept that our understanding is always flawed, and that our very flaws can turn around and change the world itself, what on earth does that mean for our future? Well, it suggests that maybe, just maybe, the most valuable things we have are humility, critical thinking, and a constant awareness of just how wrong might be.